Hey everybody, it's Travis speaking. We're here today to take a little bit of a look at spur gears in Inventor, and as you can see I've got the new Inventor 2014 up, and we've got some gears set up already here. So what I wanted to do was just respond to a viewer who had requested this video a couple weeks back, and finally got a chance to put it together, so hopefully this will help. So to get started on creating a set of spur gears, what we need to do is start a new assembly. So to do that, I'm going to come up here to the application menu, and I'm going to click on the new button, and I'm just going to access the metric templates. And what you'll want to do is start with a standard millimeter assembly. So we'll hit create, and we'll just wait for our assembly features to load up, and it looks like we're ready to go. So first order of operations, what you'll want to do is save yourself the error message and save this. So what I'm going to do is override this one here, YouTube gears. I'll click save, and now we can start the design of our gear set. So if we come over to the design tab, you'll see that we have a whole bunch of tools in here for design accelerators. So I'm going to choose the drop down menu for spur gears and choose that first option, and as you can see in here there's a whole lot of really precise information relative to the design of gears. So as far as the angles go, we're just going to leave that standard for the time being, but I just wanted you to see that there's some inputs that you can change here. So you can design your gear by a known gear ratio or by the number of teeth that have to relate. So we'll leave it as number of teeth, but just know that these are the two places that you would change that information. So I'll leave that at 29, and for my first gear I'm going to change this in the drop down menu to component. In gear 2 I'm going to leave this as no model. So now we're just going to be creating gear 1 for the time being. So I'll click on OK, and it gives me a prompt for the naming conventions. I'm just going to let it do its thing, and as you can see here it creates a little bit of a gear for me. Now the first gear in an assembly, or the first anything in an assembly, is always grounded. So what you can do is right click on the component once it's placed and click grounded, and now you can move it around a little bit. So we'll come back to spur gears to make our secondary gear. Now I'm going to change this to no model here on gear 1, and gear 2 I'm going to change to component, and we'll just hit OK again, and now we get our second gear. Okay, so what we need to do is apply some constraints. So we'll expand our two gears so we can get an idea what to constrain, and the best way of going about this is come down to the component itself and expand the origins for the component. You'll see that there's two folders. Just leave this one as is and expand this origin here. Again, that's underneath the component itself. So I'm just going to expand this, and now I've got both of these expanded, and I'm going to be using some of the world axes and planes as well, so I'll expand that origin folder as well in my model browser. So what I want to do is not so much ground this, but I want to anchor it to one spot, and we're going to share the z-axis of this gear to the world z-axis. So I'll get back over to my assembly tab, and from my constraint dialog box I'm just going to grab that z-axis, and then I'm going to grab the other z-axis and hit OK to apply that. The next thing I want to do is apply one of these faces to one of these planes, probably this one here, the XY, so that this isn't moving all around in space. So I'll just do that quick. I'll select this face here and this plane, and I'll hit OK, and now that one's stationary. So it's moving along that axis, but it's not moving back and forth like this one can right now. So the next thing I'll do is get these so that they're merged together. What we'll want to do that is constrain their two z-axis. So again, I'm going to come back and choose the z-axis from spur gear 1, and now that I've got that done, I can come down here and grab this axis. Now what we need to do to offset this properly is get the center distance. So for the time being I'm just going to say OK and leave the constraint as it is. And now that we know we're sharing an axis here, I can come to either one of these gears, right click with them selected, and I want to choose Edit using Design Accelerator. This brings us back to the dialog box that we can use to find our center distance, and this is what we're going to use as our offset. So with that selected, I'll press Control C and hit OK, and then I'm going to come back to my last constraint. I'm going to right click and hit Edit, and now I'm going to apply that center distance to my offset. Now that might not look like it's touching because we haven't applied a flush constraint to the two gears, but if we go to an orthographic view, you'll see that it won't go off that center distance. So next order of operations, let's get these together. So we'll click on one face, we'll click on the next face, and we'll choose the flush option, and now we know that they're really together. Okay, so now this one's turning, and this one can turn, but we need them to turn together. So one more constraint on just my larger gear here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to constrain its z-axis about a world plane, and I think I'm going to use that one right there. So now they're both relatively stationary except for their two z-axis. So now we'll come back to constrain, and we need to apply the motion constraint. But when we come to our motion constraint, you'll see that there's a ratio. This is where we need to put our gear ratio. So I'm going to cancel out of this for the time being and return to our gear. I'll say Edit using Design Accelerator again, and I'm going to find my gear ratio. With that selected, I press Control C again and hit OK. And now I'm going to come back to that motion constraint. So I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to grab one of these faces here, and then I'm going to use my view cube so I can get a closer look. That face should do right there. And then in the ratio, I press Control V to input the proper ratio and hit OK. So now these should be working nicely together, but there might be some interference. One way of checking this is to go to the Inspect tab, and then you can go to your Analyze Interference button and choose your two model components. If you see these red pieces, it means that you have some intersection. So that's okay. We'll come to an orthographic view, and we'll just disable our motion constraint for the time being. We'll select that, right click, and hit suppress, and now we can adjust these without actually removing the constraint. Another thing you might want to do is come back to that shared make constraint and just increase this by maybe a millimeter or two, and that'll just give us a little bit more tolerance when we turn that constraint back on. Okay, so I'm just going to come back to my rotation constraint, unsuppress it, and now I have a nicely meshed gear. So I can use my left mouse button to manipulate these, or you can come back and apply a driven constraint. Anyway, so that's how you can put together a quick set of spur gears. I hope you all enjoyed it and you learned a little bit of something today. Thanks for watching. Bye now.